Hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, it is 8:15 or 6:15, and let's see, looks like we have Susan, Carmen, Lene. Are we waiting for there's Dr. Stark. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:15 p.m. And opening the Can we go ahead and have the Pledge of Allegiance by Dr. Weeks?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Diaz. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll go ahead and move on to roll call.
Susan Benjamin?
Here.
Louisa Stark? Is Mrs. Stark here?
Yes, she's here. I think, Dr. Stark, you've got your headphones. You all ready to go there? Okay, Jim's going to want to unmute you.
Okay. Leanne Almy?
Present.
Elora Diaz?
Present.
Carmen Trujillo?
Present.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're not muted. See, when you wiggle the mouse, you can see all the controls.
Uh-huh.
When there's a slash, it's muted, but now it's live.
Okay.
Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Are there any questions, discussion?
This is Lene Almy, I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Okay, with that, the motion passes, and we will go ahead and move on to awards, recognitions, and announcements.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the governing board. I'd like to start off with our new staff welcome that began on July 23rd and ran through the 29th. We have 43 new educators who were hired for the school year coming up, which is 5 less than the year prior. And as of July 29th, our latest report here, we had 8.5 vacancies remain. I doubt that we still have those 8.5 vacancies. Dr. McLaughlin, did you want to add anything to the new staff welcome?
It was a very successful 5 days where our new folks were learned how to engage in distance learning.
Perfect, thank you. Our certificated staff returned on July 30th. Meet the Teacher Night was very successful on August 4th. And then of course, our first day of school began August 6th. Now I'd like to turn a quick staff retention report over to Dr. Victor Diaz, who has some information on staff retention. Are you out there, Dr. Diaz?
I sure am there, Dr. Weeks. My apologies for being just a couple minutes late. Madam President, members of the board, very excited to present to you some information about staff retention from last year to this year. Of course, with everything that's going on, consistency is more important now more than ever. And so with that in mind, we did several things to make sure we were very strategic about our retention efforts last year. And I'm happy to say that based on outcomes I'll share with you today, they were quite successful. Very big celebration. We retained 93.5% of our teachers from last year until this year. That is definitely a number that most other districts would be quite envious of. More impressively, we retained about 96% of our support staff. And within that 96%, 100% of our exempt support staff returned. And another celebration for us is that 100% of our principals returned. So we take that all just to show us that we're on the right track in terms of making sure we're recruiting great people, we're keeping those people here, we're keeping them satisfied, and just very excited to share those numbers with you today. And want to just take a moment and thank all of our educators, all of our leaders who are making sure, again, that consistency is something that we're providing to our students at this time.
Dr. Diaz, can you repeat the percentage of teacher retention?
Yep, 93.5.
Thank you.
This is Susan Benjamin. Dr. Diaz, there are 8.5 positions left. Are those filled like Dr. Weeks hopes?
We have some offers out for a few of them. Several of the 8.5 positions are positions that didn't open up until later in the summer. So EL interventionist positions, for example, are some of those positions. And so we have offers out for a couple of them. We're hopeful that those offers are going to be returned. In terms of classroom teachers, there was just one K-8 general education classroom position unfilled. We had a very late resignation in the summer that led to that opening. And so we have a very high qualified substitute there who's done long-term substitute work for us for a number of years, and we're very excited that she's there.
Well, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. What about special ed? Have you filled all the positions for special education?
Sadly, no. We have 3 resource positions that are still open. Now more than ever, special educators are harder to find. The good news is I met with Alicia Zelvis, our special education director today, to talk about doing some balancing in terms of caseloads in order to minimize the impact of having 3 fewer special educators. We also have in place right now two substitute teachers who are among our ranks of retired teachers who have worked with students with special needs in the past, who are providing extra support for those students and those families as well.
And those substitutes are certified special ed?
They're currently on substitute certificates. I'm not fully aware of what their certificates were before they were retired. I've only been familiar with them in the time that since they retired from our district.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that is a huge celebration, Dr. Diaz. Thank you so much for sharing that. Are there any other questions from the governing board for Dr. Diaz? Perfect. We'll move on to Mr. Quintana with an enrollment update.
Dr. Weeks, I just wanted to once again just celebrate the work of the entire HR team. I know, Dr. Diaz, that you really emphasize the work of the whole team, and it's evident that you guys are, really coming together even in the midst of COVID. So thank you for all you're doing.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Quintana, can you provide an enrollment update for us, please? Mr. Quintana, I think you're muted.
Hi, Troy, are you able to allow me to share the screen?
There you go. You should be good now.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Weeks. So I want to share information regarding attendance in the first few days of school. As you know, we started providing distance learning on last Thursday. So it's been 4 days that we have information for that I want to share with you and the board. If you look at the chart here, we're basing the attendance on a percentage basis of enrollment. So if you look at the chart here, we have starting with Thursday, Friday, Monday, and Tuesday. We don't count yet the information from Wednesday because we normally have about a day lag before we get the full information. And so we're looking at the first 4 days. And the average of the first 4 days of attendance, again, compared to enrollment, has been 89%. And that is a little bit of a change from prior years. We typically have an enrollment, attendance a percentage of in the 95 range. So this year, probably because of the situation that we're in, we're having a lower percentage of attendance, to start off with. And just some information, we're basing this on an enrollment of 5,716 students, not including preschool. And we have a net decrease in enrollment of approximately 212 students, K-8 students, from last year at this point. And again, that's still, that's still kind of a pending number that may change because we're early on to the school year. We also have not confirmed what we call concurrencies with other districts. And that what that means is that we might have students that are enrolled at our school districts, or in our school district, and also another different school district. And so in the next few days, we'll need to confirm where that student is actually attending. So we'll get that confirmed and get those numbers corrected. And like I mentioned, we typically have about 95% percentage in attendance compared to enrollment. So this year is a little bit lower than what we had in the past. And so we'll see how that goes. And we want to track very carefully what the attendance is within the first 10 days of school. And as some of you may or may not know, that basically the policy guides us to say that if a student is not attending a school within the first 10 days or 10 consecutive days, we have to withdraw them from enrollment. And so that's, between now and the 10th day, it's kind of a critical time to get all the students to attend classes. Any questions?
Mr. Quintana, I have a question on item number 1. So does that mean that 89% of the students who are enrolled are showing up for their classes? Is that what that means?
Correct.
And we're typically at a 95%?
Yes, in a typical year, we track the last couple of years, and we're typically at about 95%. So we are a little bit lower, and obviously it's probably because of the COVID and the idea of distance learning being new to students as well and families. That's probably the case. And also we're hoping that that'll improve in the next few days and going forward to the 40th day.
Mm-hmm. Does this have are we currently analyzing budget implications, or are we waiting until the 10-day mark or another mark to do so?
Yeah, as far as budget goes, the critical time is going to be the 40th day because for a couple of reasons. One is that's when we kind of determine the full ADM for the year, but also more importantly that there's a grant available from the governor's office that is going to provide a funding for enrollment this year compared to last year. And then basically whatever the 40th day number is, if it's below last year's ADA number on the 40th day, the governor's office is going to provide funding for that gap based on the stabilization grant that's being offered and available.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Carmen Trujillo. I was wondering if there's any, the word just left my brain. As far as technology is concerned, is there maybe a small percentage of just maybe technical difficulties that might be a barrier to that percentage getting a little higher? Do we have any, status on that right now?
I will also let Troy answer the question as well. Troy is our, as you know, our director of MIS. And but what we have found is that we do have computers and connections with all the families. We do have that available for everyone, and we've also been setting up hotspots, in And for families that don't have, access to the internet, we've been providing those as well. And so that might have been maybe a concern the first day possibly, because we had a lot of just a lot of some things that they had to deal with the first day. But I think that's leveled off over the next few days. Honestly, I think it's really more of a families just getting used to the idea that, hey, they're not coming to school physically, so now we got to get on a computer, and they're probably trying to set up some things at home. But obviously, that's all anecdotal, and we're not really sure.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Quintana, this is Susan Benjamin. Could you speak a little about concurrencies and how it's confirmed where a student is attending at this particular point because you're not seeing them physically?
Yeah. So what happens is we basically look at enrollment based on last year's enrollment numbers, and we carry those forward to this current year. And so if a student, for example, if they, during the summer, they decided to go to a different district and sign up at their district, but didn't tell us, then it will show up on our records that that they're still attending. I mean, they're still enrolling in our school. And so what we need to do is we need to work with the other districts and to collaborate as to where they're actually attending, and also get with those families as well to find out if they're not attending our school, where are they going? And so that'll happen over the next couple of weeks. Again, it's really in cooperation with the district.
How do you know which ones to target? Is it they're not using the computer we gave them, or how do you know who to look at?
Yeah, they're not accessing our computer. So yeah, that's something we do know, that we haven't enrolled in our system, but they're not attending our classes through the computer. So that that part we do know. Now it's a matter of, okay, we're not sure if they're attending a different school in another district. So that's something I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, and that's how you start to check it out to see who is where, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah, because if that person is not doesn't attend our school for, let's say, for 10 consecutive days, that's where the 10th day is so critical. Then we have to start inquiring as to where is the student and why they're not attending our classes, and then we'll try to connect with other districts. And Troy, I'm not sure if there's something else you can add to that, if you'd like.
Yeah. So my department's running what they call integrity reports every day, and we'll get reports on if another district has claimed enrollment for a student. And so my department goes through those and they work through those, and sometimes it's the student has come, sometimes they really are a student and we have to work with that other school district to withdraw that student. And then sometimes it's the other way around, where they're, the parents may have never have told us that they've left our district and now they've gone to enroll in another school. So we work through those concurrencies daily. And like Mr. Quintana said, after the first 10 days of school, then any student that has not attended our schools in those first 10 days, then the office staff will withdraw any student.
So are you using, I would assume that the teachers have a role, and so they check their role to see who's, supposed to be there, and the kids are, they see the kids. And so that's part of it too, is that the schools then can tell you the children that have not attended. Is that right? Exactly, yeah. And that's why you see, so the 12th was yesterday. Normally in a normal school year, that would be pretty accurate attendance, but a student, with asynchronous learning can attend school at any point. So the teachers need to log in the following morning and really take attendance for the day before. But all throughout the day, they have a spreadsheet where they're marking to make sure that they've seen a student engage in something, live lessons, turning in homework, logging into Google, just something, so that, and then the next morning, they'll go back to the previous day and then mark any student that they know hasn't interacted with anything, they'll mark them as absent. Okay, that makes sense to me. So do you have a plan after the 10th day, what you do to retrieve computers, or what's going to happen with that?
The schools have gotten very good about retrieving computers because we had to retrieve them from our 8th graders and withdrawn students over the summer. So we know where every computer's at. And so it'll probably be the 12th day, honestly, that we'll unenroll those students because again, enrollment is 1 day or attendance is 1 day behind. So on that 12th day, the schools will be on the phone calling those parents, saying that, we need the devices back. The newer devices have GPS tracking in case we can't track them down.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Troy. Any other questions? Great. I am done with this part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. And Mr. Hio, to your point, as you might imagine, the first day or two was a little clunky, a little rocky. We had, parents coming back. There was lots of, I would say, tier 1 tech support that needed to be had. The schools and the MIS team handled those questions very well. I was at Herd the other morning and only ran into one parent. So those questions have been dying down rapidly. So I want to celebrate our schools, our teachers, our staff, and our MIS team for just being all in and having all hands available to make sure that parents and students are getting what they need for this online instruction, and to call out the teachers specifically for delivering those live lessons. I was at Magnet, kind of peeking through some of the doors and watching teachers fully engaged with their students online, and it was a sight to see. I've been around for 25 years or more, and I have not seen a first day of school quite like this. And so it was very interesting. But like I said, all hands, all in, and everybody's really coming together. And I couldn't be more proud as the superintendent of this district on what everyone, all 1,100 of us, have really put forth in our effort to launch the most successful school year that we can under the circumstances. So thank you to everyone out there for all your hard work. And Madam Chair, we are finished with the awards, recognitions, and announcements. I will say that it's beginning to feel a little bit more normal. So I think with our recognitions and announcements, I think we'll begin to start bringing back some of our traditional celebrations. And I think you'll begin to see more of those as the board meetings move on. But we are ready, you, Madam Chair, to move on to the next item.
Thank you so much. All right, so we'll move on to item E. Item B, the superintendent's report.
So the superintendent's report, Madam Chair, and members of the board, is really kind of encompassed into this awards, recognitions, and announcements tonight. So there's not really anything more that I would add to the report. You will have heard, you have seen all of the moving targets with regards to the metrics and the Arizona state health departments. And tomorrow we expect to see county health department roll out a dashboard. So as we receive more information, we will be passing this information not only along to you, but to our community as well.
Thank you. And I assume that also includes the governor's metrics as well.
Yes, so the governor and the ADE came together through the Arizona Department of Health Services. They delivered a metrics that's based on county data. And then the Maricopa County Health Department will come out, we hear tomorrow, with the metrics that's specific to school district and local zip codes within our county. And so 7% seems to be the target number with regards to recommending coming back to school. I think the county will have a window of between 5 and 10%. But there's a lot to digest there. And so we'd like to take some time to digest it. And then once we have a thorough understanding of how all these pieces come together, then we'd like to be able to begin presenting this information kind of in a broader sense.
Thank you so much.
This is Susan Benjamin. This is Susan Benjamin. Can I just add that? And I saw that that it was 7% for 2 weeks. And I looked and we were at 12.6 at this particular point. So we've got a ways to go before we get to 7%. And I will just tell you, I've been watching other states, and other states are looking at 5 and 3%. So not that we'll do that, but just wanted you to know. I have one more thing I wanted to add to that. I don't know, I haven't seen this in a tweet, and maybe it's been out there and I've just missed it, Dr. Weeks, but the Arizona Department of Administration and the Arizona Department of Health Services has expanded their Mask Up Arizona program. Have you seen that?
What I know is they do have a program. I believe you can apply for up to 5 masks.
Correct.
That are branded Mask Up.
Right.
I don't know that link is on our website, but we can certainly put it on our website so folks can go out and get their own masks. Let me make a note of that.
Yeah, all students and school staff in Arizona can order 5 washable, usable cloth masks today. So it would be a good thing to put that out there, that link, so that people could, both staff and students could do that.
And free.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Benjamin.
Thank you. We will go ahead and move on to item C1.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one community email for this evening.
Okay, so the community comment is from Marin Mahoney. To the board, my son has finished his first full week of online kindergarten at Kenilworth Elementary, K-Town. I want to thank my son's teacher, especially Ms. Plancart and Principal Anthony, for all the efforts and energies they have out into the 2020 and 2021 school year. It is clear that everyone is working incredibly hard to make this a fun and engaging experience. My comment is regarding the online learning plan and the length of time spent on Zoom. I'm concerned that the current structure of mostly synchronous learning that takes place over the course of 7 hours is too much for a 5- and 6-year-old, difficult for working parents to coordinate, and is a heavy burden to place on teachers. The Arizona Department of Education released an emergency distance learning report with the recommendations that are relevant here. On page 12, the report recommends the total students' work time for kindergartners is 45 minutes. Not necessarily continuous. She referenced the actual PDF link and then says, has the board considered these guidelines? Is there a way to implement these recommendations in the existing plan? Is school funding tied to how much time the students spend on Zoom, or is there another reason the online school day is so long? Thank you very much for your time and consideration for this issue. Sincerely, Marin Mahoney, parent.
Thank you. And as a reminder, the board cannot respond directly to the community communications, but this is something that we do consider moving forward. So now we'll move on to item D. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Carmen Trujillo.
And do I have a second?
This is Lene Almy, I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none.
I have just one comment, and it's under, this is Susan Benjamin. I just have one request or one comment. And it's under the section of request approval for ratification of employment of administrative certified and support staff. Number 7, D7. I am requesting the resume of Brant Lloyd, who's the CNI coordinator for assessment and accountability. I saw the resume for the new public relations, marketing, communications person, but I didn't see the coordinator of assessment and accountability attached to that. So could you please, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about that person now, and then send us the resume, background of this person. Brant Lloyd, I think is his name. Yeah, Brant Lloyd.
Dr. McLaughlin, do you have any information on this coordinator?
I'd be happy to get his resume to you, Ms. Benjamin. I'll work with Dr. Diaz, Dr. Vic Diaz, and get his resume to all the board members.
Thank you.
Is there any additional discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. We will move on to item E1.
Thank you, Madam President, governing board members, cabinet, community members listening in. It is a pleasure to request the approval of ratification of Phoenix No. 1's K-8 distance learning plan, our preschool distance learning plan, and our revised 2020-2021 calendar. So if I could just have a minute to pull up my PowerPoint. Okay. Let me just get my screens organized here. My apologies. All right. On June 24th, Governor Ducey, as you know, issued an executive order, his first one, and that executive order was titled Prioritizing Kids in Schools During COVID-19. This executive order required that all public schools submit a distance learning plan if that was the plan that they were going to implement when school started. They needed to submit this plan to ADE prior to the first day of school, which for us was August 16th. That's why we're asking for a ratification of this distance learning plan. Our distance learning plan is based on our General Education Action Team's recommendations, our Charting a Course for the Safe Return to Learning Handbook, the Teaching and Learning section specifically, as well as our board adopted instructional resources. So all of that was used to ground our distance learning plan. Our distance learning plan is also grounded in our strategic plan goals. And usually I am able to narrow this down to 1 or 2 of our strategic plan goals, but our distance learning plan actually is grounded in each of our strategic plan goals. So our distance learning plan truly is how we plan on achieving academic success for each and every student. It is based on a rigorous, relevant, and research-based learning environment, and we have trained our staff, and that training will continue. None of us have mastered distance learning yet, including our students and families. It's about ensuring that our plan provides for that student enrollment that we want. We want each of our schools to be at capacity. We want our plan to be about equitable access. We, of course, this one is always at the forefront of our minds when we are planning. We want to ensure that our students are at the heart of every decision made. And we want to make sure that our families are feeling satisfied with our distance learning plan. We know that our families are feeling some dissonance right now. And we had a problem-solving session this afternoon. So we are working on rectifying any of those challenges that our families are experiencing at this time. And finally, we will hire, retain, and develop highly motivated and effective staff. Our staff is highly motivated to ensure that this distance learning plan works for each and every student in our school district. And we have been working on developing, each and every one of us have been working on developing our skills in this new environment that we find ourselves. Of course, our distance learning plan is focused on curriculum and instruction, and we have ensured that our distance learning plan meets our curriculum alignment model, meaning that our written, taught, and tested curriculum is aligned. And you all have a copy of the distance learning plan, but I just want to quickly go through the components of the distance learning plan. Mr. Harris already explained how we do attendance, and what is written in our distance learning plan is already outdated, so we are able to revise and we can submit revisions to ADE along the way. Another component of our distance learning plan is teacher and staff expectations and support. And we have our work from where you work best policy and regulation. We have professional expectations guidance that each principal shared with their teachers. And we also have our handbook, charting a course for safe return to learning. Our distance learning plan includes for math, ELA, science, and social studies. This is our instructional method that we will use in this particular subject area. This is how the content will be delivered, and these are the ways we will monitor our students. For each of those subjects in our distance learning plan, you see listed our formative assessment strategies and how often those formative assessment strategies will be implemented by our teachers. Most of them are daily, some of them are weekly because they do inform instruction. And then we have our summative assessment strategies and their frequency. And our summative assessment strategies normally come at the end of a unit or at a benchmark time. For example, our iReady, their iReady diagnostic assessment is given 3 times per year. We have a section on how we will meet the needs of students with disabilities. We will have a section on, meeting the needs of English learners. We have a section that our trauma-informed practices action team put together, and that their work is listed in the section under social and emotional learning support for students. We have an explanation of how students will demonstrate mastery of academic content. We have a list of our benchmark assessments for math and ELA and when those will be administered and how they will be administered. And then we have some additional information, which just explains to ADE that this plan came from our action teams, our 4 different action teams, that we also held a very successful summer school, which I've talked more about, and that was a great learning experience for us about effective distance learning.
Dr. McLaughlin, I have a question
Yes,
on the components.
Yeah.
The component around the teaching methods, does that provide guidance on time requirements for synchronous learning? Going back to the comment we had earlier, there are clear guidelines by several well-known organizations, and I hope that we are inserting that, if that's possible, into instruction.
Yes, so that's not a part of the distance learning plan, Dr. Diaz, but it definitely is part of the expectation for scheduling that our principals received back in May. We do have instructional minutes that are required by ADE, and ADE is not being flexible on the number of instructional days or the instructional minutes that we are required to have for each grade level band for each subject.
So instructional minutes, does that have to mean synchronous, or could instructional minutes blend of?
Right, instructional minutes can be synchronous and asynchronous. I will say that we are aware of the kindergarten challenge, and one of the, we just had a problem solving session this afternoon, and one of our plans is to make synchronous learning for kindergarten in the morning and asynchronous learning in the afternoon. So that will give a little bit of flexibility.
I think it would be, and I don't know if other board members have an opinion on this or not, but I think it would be helpful for families and teachers if there was a uniform expectation for the maximum number of synchronous minutes. I think because digital teaching is so new, and everyone is coming in with different types of knowledge, and I think it would be really unproductive if we had some teachers who are, teaching for 5 hours, like live, versus some teachers who have, maybe 30 minutes or whatever is age appropriate because, they've been getting other information from somewhere else. So I just personally think that we should do that, have some consistency there for maximum minutes per grade level.
We will look into that. Yep, definitely. Maximum minutes for synchronous and maximum minutes for asynchronous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You've seen our preschool distance learning plan, and these are our components of our preschool district learning plan. They are using Google Classroom just like our K-8. They are engaging their families in bi-weekly family conferences. Our teachers are engaging our families in consistent communication, especially if students are not attending school. We're really working with families to find out what are the obstacles in their child attending school. Of course, preschool is focused on developmentally appropriate practices, as we all are. Their social worker has office hours, and they include the program monitoring and evaluation. And Child Find is still in existence. We still have to follow those rules. And here's just a snip of the calendar. We only made, I will back up and say that the governing board approved this calendar in December of 2018. The change that we made is we eliminated early release Wednesdays. That was a recommendation from the general education team in order to accommodate our blended learning model and also our distance learning model. So we still have half days on Wednesdays that were reserved for teachers to prep report cards, for teachers to prep for parent-teacher conferences. We still have early release days for parent-teacher conferences. So the only change to the calendar is that elimination of every Wednesday being an early release Wednesday. So, administration recommends that the governing board approve the ratification of Phoenix No. 1's K-8 distance learning plan, preschool distance learning plan, and the revised 2021 calendar.
Did we lose you, Dr. Diaz?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry, my internet connection is not stable. Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Dr. McLaughlin, I kind of I didn't hear the last part of your presentation. Was that the end of your presentation?
That was it. The calendar was the last. Yep. And I made the recommendation that the governing board approve the ratification of Phoenix No. 1's K-8 distance learning plan, preschool distance learning plan, and the revised 2021 calendar.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I got most of what you said. So I'd like to go ahead and call for a motion to approve item E1.
This is Lene Almy, so moved.
Can I have a second, please?
I second the motion.
All right. Is there any discussion or questions?
This is Susan Benjamin. Dr. McLaughlin, how many children are signed up for preschool, and how many are typical and how many are have special needs?
I don't have that information at my fingertips, Ms. Benjamin, but I will get that to you.
And what is the response of these facilitators at this point?
Facilitators, can you please clarify for me what you mean by facilitators?
The people at home, the learning facilitators, the people that are going to implement what the teachers are putting out there for the preschoolers.
The families that I understand what you're saying. So far, so good. Preschool doesn't actually start until August 17th, which is Monday. But so far, so good. We haven't haven't had any issues brought to our attention.
Okay, well, there's been a couple people that have talked about whether or not they'd be able to implement, and I know that you're going to do a lot of training to support the families so that they can implement the strategies, because you're talking about the creative curriculum, and there's some specificity in that, and how that works. And so it would be nice to have a list of all the trainings that they're going to do with the parents, because I think that's will be very helpful to support them, because we know the children can't work independently, and it'll be important that they're highly trained.
We will get that list of trainings to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions or discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to item E2.
And I will pass this item over to Mr. Quintana.
Yes, thank you, Denise and Madam President. So this item is regarding a mitigation plan that we'd like to request the approval of the board. And what it is basically it's protocols that to mitigate the spread of the COVID virus in our schools for staff, students, visitors, and so forth. And wanted to mention that this is part of the plan that was presented to the board a couple of meetings ago that entailed the back to school plan and the safety plan that were presented. So this plan is basically almost word for word the portion on the protocols to mitigate this COVID spread. And so the plan covers, for example, communication and training for employees and teachers and so forth. It also covers PPE guidelines when it comes to wearing masks and so forth, and other PPE for staff. It covers physical distancing for the students, for teachers and so forth at the schools and all sites. It covers cleaning and disinfecting that we have to do, whether it's hand washing or disinfecting areas that have been exposed. It also covers health screenings that we do for students coming in, just to physically look at if they have any symptoms, and also doing temperature checks as they come in. It also covers protocols when we have an exposure of the virus, in the school. It covers the protocols of what to do in that situation. And again, this is the basically word for word the plan that we presented a few minutes ago. And we wanted to obviously address any questions you might have and also to request your approval.
Thank you. Can I please have a motion to approve item E2?
This is Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Luisa, I accept.
Okay. And are there any questions or discussion?
I don't have any.
All right, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes, and we'll move on to item E3.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, cabinet members, and community members. We are
Can I just
asking-
interrupt, Dr. McLaughlin? Can I just interrupt? I missed something in the one that we did, not the mitigation, but the one before that. And I just have a question.
Okay.
Okay. And it's related to the special education. I missed the page and I apologize for going back.
No worries.
It says, it's on page 14. It says arrange for appointment-based in-person special ed and related services for students that cannot access FAPE in an online environment.
Yes.
You see that? Okay.
Yes.
My question is it still the stance of the district that you're not willing to provide like a COVID stipend for those teachers and related service folks that may have to go into the homes?
We are not requesting that any of our teachers go into homes, but what we mean by appointment is that these folks would bring their child if transportation is not on the IEP. If transportation is on the IEP, then we will provide transportation to the school setting, and we would work with the child in the school setting if we cannot provide the service virtually.
And will those staff, will you provide them with more PPE?
Yes. Yep. For our medically fragile students, for example, should we need to bring a medically fragile student in, should the parent want their child to come in that is medically fragile, we have hospital-like gowns, shoe coverings, face masks, face shields. I think that covers.
For the staff and the students.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We are asking for the board's approval of learning labs. On July 23rd, Governor Ducey signed an executive order open for learning, and this executive order states that beginning on August 17th, school districts must provide free on-site support services for those students who need a place to go during distance learning time. We must implement these learning labs in order to receive funding. Our enrollment stabilization grant that Mr. Quintana referred to earlier will be at jeopardy if we do not implement these learning labs. We are calling them learning labs. And Mr. Curtis Johnson is going to share with you tonight about our learning labs, what a day in a learning lab will look like, and all the steps that we're taking to ensure the safety of our students. So Mr. Johnson, I turn it over to you. There he is.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, cabinet. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint here. So thank you, Dr. McLaughlin, for stating the intro there. The objective of the Learning Lab is designed to be an on-site support service that provides a safe and positive environment for children who need to be monitored during the day to receive distance learning instruction from their homeschool teachers. Some of the logistics of the Learning Lab are no transportation. Unless a student has a 504 plan or it's written in their IEP for a special needs student, we will provide transportation, but otherwise it's parent drop-off. There is no teacher-led instruction. This program is mainly facilitated by instructional aides. The two locations that we have in place are Magnet Traditional School and Edison. The alternative locations in the event we need to expand the Learning Lab programs are Garfield and Hurd. There was an online registration process that took place maybe close to about 2 weeks ago, and parents were given an opportunity to register their children online. If in fact they were not able to complete the online application on their own, they could schedule an appointment with me directly, and I could assist them or assist them over the phone in terms of registering as well. So a day at the Learning Lab, what does it look like? When students arrive, there will be a required temperature check. There will be a face mask covering required. We do have some limited resources available. We did order some PPE for students in the event that they did not have a mask. Every child is expected to arrive with their learning device and materials in hand. Again, we do have limited computers, as many of them have already been distributed to the students. We will have general items such as papers, pencils on hand in the event children need some additional assistance in that regard. Children will be escorted directly to their assigned classrooms. All students must wash and sanitize their hands upon entering a classroom, and students will be designated a specific workspace within a 6 feet social distancing as required. And we will make sure that we abide by all the health and safety protocols necessary to keep everybody as safe as possible. In terms of recruitment for staff, as of right now, we do not have any support staff in terms of regular instructional aides inside the classrooms or teachers at this point. As of right now, this program is specifically facilitated by our peer staff and our peer team. But in the event the program does expand or it does get bigger, we may need to seek additional support from the two other population groups. Any questions?
This is Naomi. I just have one. Based on the online registration, what kind of numbers are you expecting for students? And do you feel like, is that the reason that you're focused solely on peer staff right now? Do you have enough staffing for that?
We do have enough peer staff to cover. At Edison, we have 40 kids enrolled, which is approximately 23 families. We are registering the kids by families as opposed to by grade, so we can limit the amount of contact per group. So we have 40 kids at Edison and we have 54 kids at Magnet. So we're looking at about a total of close to 100 students. So that was well within what we were able to manage with just our peer folks at this time.
This is Susan Benjamin. Curtis, what are the hours?
So right now the hours for drop-off begin at 7:15 a.m. and we are encouraging parents to have their students arrive prior to 8 a.m. so that way we can make sure that they have an opportunity to eat breakfast, get their learning space set up and fully equipped to be able to navigate through the virtual platform beginning at 8 a.m. We will offer lunch and snack as the kids are going home, and the Learning Lab itself will end at 3 o'clock. However, we have provided a window time for students to be picked up between 3 o'clock and 3:45.
And in your schedule, clearly that's a long time. So they'll get breaks and they'll get to go outside, or how will that look? What will that look like?
So the students are going to be working with the teacher in the virtual platform. So for example, if a teacher is requiring, a 10-minute stretch break, we will do the same in the lab. We have not identified any specific recess time. This was solely a monitored based scenario where students are engaging with their teachers at all times on the virtual platform. We will, again, offer breaks and so forth as the teachers do in their virtual setting, but we have not outlined any additional recess time for those specific, those timeframes for the lab.
So does everybody take lunch at the same time then?
So we have tried to keep things as consistent as possible across the board. I know in terms of the lab and working with Dr. Brown, we have recommended that the Learning Lab or the virtual teachers have their lunch somewhat simultaneously as the Learning Lab, and that time is identified between 11 and 12. Everybody is, understanding and flexible, and that we may have a little bit more of a task because we do have kids on site, so there is going to be some flexibility in terms of when kids may be able to arrive or come back in. But the primary goal is to make sure that we keep everybody safe, get everybody fed, and make sure that we do the best we can to maximize as much opportunity as we can for the virtual platform.
And I'm assuming you said this, and I might have missed it, but everybody's going to be at least 6 feet apart. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have a 15-person cap in each classroom. We do not want to overload these classrooms in any fashion. Each desk has already been pre-set up. Each child's workspace has been identified. We have pre-registered every student to a specific classroom to make sure that we keep our ratios low. We want to make sure that we have adequate spacing from one student to another, so we can be safe, minimize contact, and do the best we can to keep everybody safe. We have 2 instructional aides right now per classroom, just to make sure that, especially for our little ones, the kinders, if they need additional support, we've got a set of extra hands that may be able to care for one that may need a little bit more attention until they get the gist and the transition of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a long time. That's a long time to sit. A really long time. Okay, all right, thank you.
Yes.
I think going off of Susan's comments, I think this is kind of, or at least one of the reasons why we need guidance or consistency on the max number of synchronous minutes, so we can have more movement for our students. Because I understand without that, we're going to have some classrooms where the students might not move for a long time. In other classes, students might be, out at recess every 30 minutes or so. So yeah, that consistency would be great. I have a question regarding recruitment. So the instructional aides or the peer staff that are there, is that purely voluntary at this point?
Yes, we did reach out to each one of our peer staff members, and we asked, if in fact we offered a learning lab, who would be on board. We have not told anybody that they had to work. This is a voluntary base. We have had some staff that have elected not to work or work from at home. So we are doing everything that we possibly can to get everybody in a position to where they have some sort of job to do, whether it be reassignment. But yes, everybody that has signed up for the lab has volunteered to work these specific hours.
Thank you.
I do want to thank Mr. Johnson, because this has truly been a heroic effort on his part. I know he hasn't slept much. He's gotten these classrooms set up physically. He's recruited the staff on his own. We have gotten conflicting messages from ADE, from the governor's office on what is required as far as a learning lab. So he has turned on a dime when necessary. So I just want to really recognize his efforts. So thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
And with that, administration recommends that the governing board approve the Learning Labs plan as presented.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve item E3?
Question, Madam President, does that mean
This
we're
is
done?
Suzanne Benjamin. I'll make a motion to approve.
Does that mean we're done having a discussion about it?
No.
Okay.
After that, the motions, all of it up for
Can
discussion.
you hear me?
Got it.
Yes. So we have a motion. Can I have a second, please?
This is Lene Almy. I'll second.
Okay. Is there additional discussion or question?
Did you all, okay. I don't know if you heard me, but I made the motion. Did you all hear me? Did it not get through?
Yes, no, it got through.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not here. Okay, I wasn't sure. All right.
Ms. Trujillo, do you have additional questions or comments?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Madam President. I just am wondering, and I know we've had this discussion before, but when we were looking to families as far as asking them if they were going to be online or or do the hybrid, I guess, make that decision, is this population of kids the families that chose to be like half on campus and half online? I'm just wondering, are we to that point yet, or is this just its separate thing, the learning labs?
Yeah, separate thing, Ms. Trujillo. When we get to that choice form, then it'll be teacher-led instruction if they chose that blended learning model. So it'll be in-person teacher-led. This is just free on-site support. It's just an adult, a peer staff member will be in the classroom monitoring the student as they work on their distance learning plan with their teacher.
Okay, so to continue with that, would there maybe their teacher change after this transition back to campus work, or would teachers stay the same? Okay, just wondering.
I don't anticipate a teacher change.
All right.
I suppose something could happen, and that might not happen, but I don't anticipate that. Yeah.
I guess my brain was thinking it would be like separate somehow. So just trying to wrap my head around really what it looks like. And my next question would be, how many special needs kids are we expecting at these two campuses?
Sure. Right now, I have 9 special needs kids that we've identified through the enrollment process. We just received 5 today. So I'm working with our special education department to verify one, enrollment, and then their exact needs, so we can make sure that we have someone on site to be able to assist with those children specifically. We have 2 confirmed students that will require more of an intense one-on-one scenario. So we've identified those students. And we also have identified 4 students that, although they have an IEP or a 504 plan, they are fully able to be integrated into a classroom in a general population setting. It should be fairly successful.
Oh, all right. One more question.
Yes.
So have we considered, I don't know how to phrase this question. So as far as the Division of Developmental Disabilities, some schools and programs provide like an after-school support type of a service. And I'm just wondering if we've ever considered maybe contracting with them for this population. I think the maximum amount of hours is 4 hours a day, but it would be, I think it would be an area that could bring in some money to the district if we needed extra hands or extra resources to help take care of the kids that needed to come to campus. So just, that's where my thoughts were running around and why I look so confused. So I'm sure there's not an answer to that question as far as whether we've considered it. But would it be considerable, I guess, to look into it?
Most definitely, Ms. Trujillo. If you have any information on that service, if you could send it my way. Ms. Selvis might know, but I'm not aware of that service. Okay. We'll take a look at it. Yep.
Follow-up question. If there is an incidence of COVID in one of these learning labs or somewhere on campus, will we be following the same type of plan that we would have if we were doing the hybrid, or what does that look like?
So I have a spreadsheet that Dr. Vic Diaz put together, great spreadsheet. It's basically a flow chart. He and I touched bases today. He also sent me that form as well so I could review it. I was also part of the safety team that was part of the suggestion and development team to put that together. If by chance there is any COVID outbreak, we will follow that flow chart to the T in terms of identifying, staff, potential exposure, people that have come in contact with those individuals. So we will follow all in-house district protocols in regards to COVID exposures or confirmed cases.
I think that flow chart was a part of the presentation. I think that was given to us at some point. I can't completely remember every detail of it, but was there an element that spoke to I mean, let's just say a kid in Learning Lab A gets it and exposes all other 15 kids. Does that mean at some point those kids would not return to the Learning Lab, or where does that fall?
So I'll answer a portion of this, and then maybe Dr. Diaz can jump in if I missed something here. So what we did was initially when we have peer in general, we register by grade. And then you have people from different households that are mixed in different populations. So one of the things that we wanted to do is minimize contact groups. So we found it most effective to register by family as opposed to by grade. So that way we could minimize the amount of contact per household. So what we've done is, I think for the most part, in terms of looking at the registration process, I think we maybe have two to three families in one particular group. And by doing that, in terms of contact, we're only looking at 2 aides and potentially 3-4 families right now that would be exposed to a potential COVID situation if in fact one of those kids or one of those staff came to work with COVID. So in terms of what Dr. Diaz and I were discussing today, obviously we would inform members of that particular class. We would do contact tracing to see if in fact any staff members or those children have crossed paths with any other groups or cohorts that we have assigned. If in fact, then if we follow the contact procedures in terms of now we have to notify this population as well. So hopefully if we do have a COVID exposure, we're doing everything we possibly can to keep all the groups separate. If we do have to close, hopefully it's just one particular classroom and not the entire population. And that's very important in terms of how we manage and the flow charts throughout the campuses to make sure that groups are not overlapping. We are staggering arrival times with staff. We're staggering how kids are getting dismissed for lunch. And we're doing everything we possibly can to keep everybody as separated as possible. Even folks that I have pinpointed as supervisors, typically in a summer session or peer, we would enter the classrooms, we would stay and monitor, we would see what's going on. I just told my supervisors to just walk by the window, look in, give them a thumbs up, let's see what their response is. If in fact somebody has to go into a classroom that is not part of that cohort, it has to be for a specific purpose. Otherwise, no one is to enter that room. It's almost like a sacred space for each group. So.
That's good to hear. Thank you again for all the logistics that you're coordinating. That's a lot, so thank you. Are there any additional questions or discussion?
This is Susan Benjamin. I have one more question that I just thought of, and it's probably for Dr. McLaughlin. I'm assuming that these learning labs are not, there's nothing that says that all the needs of the children with special needs or with 504 plans and their accommodations, they're not, how does that work? Is that just the same as it would be because they're working through distance learning, they're just sitting in a different place? Is that how that is?
Yes, Ms. Benjamin. The purpose of the Learning Lab is not to meet, I don't know how to phrase this accurately. So the same question applies to a special ed student that attends a Learning Lab. Can we meet the child's IEP goals, service minutes, etc. virtually? And if we can't, and the child is in the Learning Lab, then our special ed resource teacher, related service provider will go to the child in the Learning Lab and provide those services in the Learning Lab.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
This is Carmen Trujillo, Madam President. I just one question, if possible. I'm just wondering if you have plans to have a nurse around at all, if needed. I'm just thinking about meds and things like that for kids. I just wondered, or would that be like a virtual thing?
Sure. Yeah. No virtual check-ins. No, definitely. I've touched base with Lynette. Our district coordinator for the nurses. She does have a staff, I believe a rotation between 3 different nurses at each site. So we will have full coverage the entire day.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. With that, the motion passes and we'll move on to item 4.
And I'm
Thank you
going
for
to
having me.
pass, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm going to pass this item over to Mr. Lynn.
Yes, Dr. Diaz and governing board members, cabinet, and those in our community. Give me a moment while I share my screen. Let's see here. I'm having a problem here, Troy. I need to get to my desktop, Troy.
You see, when you hit share screen, it should say desktop or desktop 1. Do you not see that?
No, I don't. No.
Tom, is it the attachment in board docs?
Yes, it is.
Okay, 1 second, I'll get it up.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Troy. This evening we have before the governing board 3 resolutions, all related to the concept of face masks. Typically, resolution to the superintendent's office, but in this case, legal counsel has advised that the governing board act on this particular agenda item due to the nature of the fact that it is about face masks. Several days ago, ASBA released a policy advisory advising that school districts speak to face masks. We have 3 of them. The first one, as you see here, is for staff. And Troy, if you scroll down, the inclusion of face coverings.
Thank you so much.
Keep going. The inclusions of face coverings is here. Thank you. You can stop at this point. And we'll notice that the format is similar for all 3 of these. The first one we're looking at is for staff, and it begins with a directive that we will wear face coverings while on property. But then it also gives 3 exclusions for folks who might not be able to wear a face mask. Anyone who has trouble breathing, is incapacitated in some way, that they could not remove their own face mask, and anyone who may have intellectual or developmental disabilities. And so we have options for exclusion, and it describes how the face covering is to fully cover the nose and the mouth and fit snugly. It addresses face shields that if they're worn, they need to contain the breath. And then following the CDC guidelines, we want to be sure that the face mask, the face covering does not stop folks from frequent hand washing, covering coughs and sneezes, and also do social distancing. At the bottom of the page, there are exceptions. The break can be done if they can take the face covering off if they're in a safe environment, but they should be done when they're away from walkways and common areas, when we're eating or drinking with physical distancing, if we're communicating with someone with a hearing loss that needs the mouth to be visible. And scroll down, Troy. And then if you're driving, it's okay to take your face mask off, but we want to be sure the vehicle is disinfected. And sometimes in the extreme heat, while physical distancing, if working outside, the mask could be removed, or when we're working alone in a classroom or an office. And so in this case, if there are any accommodations, an employee should contact the Human Resources Department. If we go to the next, Troy, for students, you'll notice that thank you, Troy. the format is the same. We have no regulation for student dress, and so this regulation is completely about face coverings. And you'll notice that the format is very similar. Following the CDC guidelines, we're speaking that the face mask should not be worn by children under the age of 2, or the same things as are applied in the other. There are exceptions. We want the face covering to cover a person's nose and mouth. A student may use a face shield, but we would want to follow the same procedures. And scroll down, Troy. We want to continue hand washing and physical distancing and covering our mouths when we cough or sneeze. And then there are exceptions that are allowable as well. And if a family needs accommodations, they're asked to contact their principal. Also, Lynette Wilkin, our lead nurse, has been involved in working with this particular regulation, as well as the next regulation for visitors, to ensure that there's a process in place to speak to those accommodations. And if we go to the next one, Troy. This regulation is in KI and it's RB, which means that this is the second regulation for the policy for visitors to schools. And again, the format is the same. And we just want to be sure that anyone visiting our campus is aware that a face covering is required. We have the same types of exceptions, the same purposes for covering the mouth and nose, fit snugly. A face shield is acceptable. Scroll down, Troy. We want to encourage frequent hand washing, physical distancing, and then there are exceptions that are allowed for visitors as well. And a visitor should contact the district administrator or the school principal if they're needing an exception. Our vendors would be included in this particular group. Families and community members would be included in this group. And should we have volunteers on our campus at some time later, it would cover those folks as well. And so these 3 regulations have been vetted thoroughly by our district legal counsel. I appreciate their support in working with the ASBA recommendation and even enhancing it to ensure that it speaks to the needs of the governor's executive orders as well as the CDC guidelines. And so at this point, administration would recommend that the governing board approve these 3 regulations related to face coverings.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Do I have a motion to approve?
I would like to approve.
And do I have a second?
This is Susan Benjamin. I'll second it.
Okay, are there any questions or comments?
Carmen Trujillo, Madam President, I've got just maybe 1 or 2. There's probably about the 5th section down regarding face shields. I really don't understand that sentence. So I was wondering if maybe there was some missing words or if I just am not.
Yes, I understand. There's a typo that we'll need to fix. It says it should read, if a face shield is worn.
Worn, okay. I tried.
Yes, a mask is still necessary. That typo is also on the student one, and so we'll fix that before they're published.
And then I was wondering too, are we calling them face coverings and not masks?
Yes,
that like
yes,
a choice, or are they kind of interchangeable?
Well, yes, we are calling them face coverings. Sometimes the word mask has a negative connotation. And we know that, you know, our governor has got the Mask Up campaign, and yes, we support that, but we choose to call them face coverings.
Right. I only asked just because just a few times in here, it reads face coverings all over the place, and then mask is used just a few times, so I just wasn't too sure. If that was like a direct thing we're doing as a district or not. That's all.
Yeah, okay. And I would be glad to, again, proof well before we publish in the manual and make sure the language is consistent.
Wonderful. I was just really wondering what we were doing as a district. Thank you very much, Tom.
This is Susan Benjamin. I have a question in terms of, I have making these assumptions, so I just want to make sure these are correct assumptions. And this, Mr. Lynn, these actually may be for Dr. McLaughlin or for Dr. Weeks. I'm assuming that children will be placed on the bus 6 feet apart. Is that a correct assumption?
Hold on.
Dr. McLaughlin, Dr. Weeks?
I'm actually going to defer that question to Dr. Diaz, who worked very hard on the mitigation plan and led our health and safety team.
Yeah.
I can answer it, but I think he can provide more specifics. We're going to do our very best to place students 6 feet apart, but that's not always going to be possible. But Dr. Diaz, would you add more clarity to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. Our transportation department was part of our health and safety team, and their recommendation was to sort of come up with a gold standard, if you will, and sort of a silver standard. The gold being a 6 foot distance, but it's in the building of routing that would make that more or less possible. So they have created a guide that would say, when possible, you would do the 6 feet by limiting one student per row, but then also staggering them in those rows so that you can make sure you're getting the 6 feet or even leaving some rows empty. But depending on the routing would depend whether or not that would actually be possible for that route. But that would be the aim for every bus. The other thing that they would do is ensure, and we already practice this for the most part, that there are assigned seats on the buses. With those assigned seats, they can make sure that if I do have to put 2 students, maybe on 2 aisle seats, it's at the last stop of the route. So that might only happen for a moment or two as I just turn the corner to get into the parking lot of the school. Those would not be the first 2 students to sit on the bus. So they started to plan out that with their routing maps. When we decided to stay closed until October, they put a pause on that, and they're going to pick that back up as we get into September.
And so do you know if you were to place the children 6 feet apart on a typical bus or regular bus, how many kids would you get on the bus? Can you tell me?
Yeah, it all depends on the size of the bus, but it would be less than a third of how many could actually fit there, and sometimes as low as a quarter of what the capacity of the bus would be.
So how many is that?
I don't have the information on top of my head in terms of knowing the different sizes of the buses in our fleet, but we could certainly get that information.
Yeah, I'd just like to know how many children we're planning on putting on the buses, because depending on how many children choose to ride the bus, that may not be an issue when it comes time to transport them. So I was just curious about that. So, the other question I have is the same thing about the classrooms. I'm assuming that the desks will be 6 feet apart. And the reason I keep asking this is that, it's hard to have a mask on all day. Yeah, and if the children are closer than 6 feet, then they're going to have their masks on. And so that's why I keep stuck on the 6 feet business. So what are the classrooms going to look like?
Yes, Ms. Benjamin, 6 feet apart. The desks will be 6 feet apart. And we know that in some classrooms, that means that we can put 17 students in a room. Some classrooms we can only put 15 students in a room. So our teachers will work to ensure that our students get mask breaks. We definitely know that that's a necessity.
Yeah, so the maximum number of kids, depending on the school, is 17, and then others, what is it, 16?
15 to 17 is the range that we determined.
Because I always think of like Kenilworth and Whittier to be larger classrooms, but it's probably because the ceilings are so high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Dr. McLaughlin, is that not one reason why we have a cohort A, cohort B when we go into the hybrid model.
Correct, exactly.
The class size almost by half.
Right, exactly, Mr. Lynn, thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
you could end up having your, yeah, and so it shouldn't be an issue in terms of splitting those in two, which is the same thing with the bus.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Right.
I get that. Okay, thank you.
I have a question related to, I guess, what this looks like for preschool kids when we come back, whenever that is. I know that it's recommended that children under 2 not wear it, but as a mom of a toddler, I have a very hard time like believing that a 3-year-old is going to keep a mask on. What's the expectation there?
I did have a conversation with Diane Salazar last week about face coverings in preschool. And she was, is supportive of encouraging students to have a face mask. It needs to be size appropriate, of course. And recognizing that, children will be children, especially in the preschool age. They'll need to work, to ensure that the mask is in place, but allowing for those exceptions in the way that they structure their day, so that if kids are outside, they may not need the mask, but if they're working in groups, they would need the mask. So I think there could be some flexibility. And Diane Salazar has been working with her teachers on that.
So are there disciplinary actions that would take place if, say, a 3-year-old just felt, I don't know, claustrophobic wearing it and just having a panic attack and crying? Would they be disciplined?
No, I don't think we would have a discipline consequence for not wearing a mask.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments?
This is Lene Almy. Mr. Lynn, can you just speak to what the process is when these regulations are no longer needed?
Yes, at that time, we'll revert back to the superintendent would have responsibility for removing language that's no longer needed in a regulation. And at that time, we would inform the governing board through a written update.
Okay, so though these are approved by the governing board, they wouldn't need to be then changed by the governing board?
I don't believe so. Is the legal counsel present? Maybe you have a comment about that, Jennifer.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jennifer McLennan. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your board meeting tonight. It has been our recommendation and the recommendation of the ACOSA lawyers that the board adopt the face coverings because it's a governor's mandate, even though they were issued as regulations. The purpose behind ASBA issuing them as regulations is so that they could be changed. The fact that the board is adopting them would not remove the superintendent's authority to change the regulations. And so even if there are additional, both the governor's order and these regulations would allow Superintendent Weeks to make additional exceptions if needed. So,
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. That the motion passes, and we'll move on to item E5.
And I will pass this item over to Dr. Weeks.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin, Madam Chair, members of the governing board. This item is a resolution that was given to us and recommended by council. It kind of sums up all of the governor's executive orders. It has a laundry list of things that need to be approved. Some things tonight have been reapproved by the governing board, so I appreciate your patience in that. This is a 2-part resolution. The first part really is just that, the executive order. And then the second part is an optional provision, which we're recommending, that allows us to do certain things, which includes the continuance of pay for those staffers who have to go home. And at this time, I know that you have all read this thoroughly. And if you have questions, I'm happy to turn this over to Jennifer, who can provide that additional guidance. But this again comes from that same group of lawyers who worked on the regulations that Tom just presented.
Dr. Weeks, should we move to make a motion first before?
Sure. I think that's a great idea.
Do I have a motion?
This is Lynn Almy. I move approval of the resolution regarding COVID-19.
And do I have a second?
I second it.
Okay, are there any questions or comments?
This is Carmen Trillo, Madam President. I've got a question. As far as the resolution is concerned, since council is recommending this, I'm wondering which other districts have a resolution like this in place that they particularly work for.
Madam President, members of the board, may I go ahead and address that question?
Yes.
So the ACOSA Law Group is meeting on a weekly basis to try to help school districts. And when the Executive Order 51 was initiated, it was the language within that executive order that allows individuals to maintain their workforce during COVID-19 if employees have to remain in an at-will status, is language that was actually written and developed by the ACOSA lawyers along with all the other alphabet groups, ASA, ASBA. So from my experience, many school districts have been in the process of adopting these resolutions as they turn over. So personally, I've been at 4 board meetings in the last week: Levine Elementary, I had 2 Litchfield, and Mohawk Valley this week. It'll be my 4th board meeting this week. So they're definitely considering them and adopting them. Some school districts are requiring all their employees to be on site or working, especially with the advent of the on-site support services or the learning labs, as you've approved tonight. So if a school district will not have at-will employees who are not going to be on call, then some of them are choosing not to adopt that provision. It's my recommendation to you that you adopt that provision. If you have work for those folks to do, this doesn't prevent you from putting them to task if they need to be.
Thank you.
I have a question on item 3C. Can you explain this a little bit more?
I don't know if somebody can pull it up for our screen or if you can read it to me. I know most of this by heart. So.
Yeah, so it's authorizing the superintendent to apply for a waiver of the requirement to provide free on-site learning if the health department, ADE, health is.
So on Friday afternoon, the Arizona Department of Education posted the application for a school district to apply for a waiver for the on-site support services, which in your district is being called the learning labs. If there is an ongoing COVID outbreak on your campuses, or if there is an outbreak in the community in a specified location, the district could apply for a waiver so that you wouldn't have to provide those. We do have a number of clients who are applying for those waivers. You have to go through the county health department initially, and the county health department has to support the application. We've had various school districts where that's been supported and some school districts where it has not been supported. To date, I'm not aware of any waiver being granted. I'm hearing that one will be for portions of the West Valley, but I don't know that for sure. So, and if the waiver is granted, and we should know if they are waivers granted by the Arizona Department of Health Services, we should know more about those in the next 2 days because all school districts are supposed to be providing those on-site support services by August 17th. So that's what this would allow your superintendent to provide that application without needing to come back to the board.
Okay. I assume though, if such a drastic change would take place, we would be informed.
We would all know about it, Dr. Diaz. There would be no doubt. We would be reporting to just about everybody with regards to a major outbreak at a school site or in the neighborhood. I do know that I'm hearing that 2 school districts, Tucson Unified and Tolleson, have applied for a waiver. So we're watching them closely to see how that process plays out.
And Dr. Weeks' information is correct as far as I know it. Others in the southern part of our state have applied and been denied. So.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have a follow-up question on item 6C. And the specific question that I have, so I'm looking at the eligibility for payment, and I did see the other document that our employees must sign. In the event that there is an outbreak and our employees are required to go home or not return to campus to perform their normal work duties, will they continue to be paid if, for example, there is absolutely nothing they can do? So in my mind, I'm thinking about, say, a child nutrition worker. There's an outbreak at a school and they cannot return to campus for 2 weeks. I wonder if they are going to be able to be given some type of online work. If they're not, will they continue to be paid since it's not a fault of their own that they're not working?
So if the governing board chooses to adopt the resolution as presented, this language would give the board and the district authority to continue to pay employees while they are on call or exposed and at home. There's also a variety of leaves that are available under federal law. So, depending on the situation about why somebody is sent home, there may be pay pursuant to a leave under the Families First Coronavirus Recovery Act. But in addition, this provision would allow you to have the employee at home, similar to what the district did in the spring.
I don't see that language in here unless maybe I missed that. And I'm specifically referring to paying employees if they have to be home because of COVID.
So in the third line, it says that it will continue to pay its employees during periods of school building closures. So that could encompass, that's where it is.
I see. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Those are all my questions. Are there any additional questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, I think I heard 4 ayes and 1 nay.
That's correct.
Okay. So with that, the motion passes and we will move on to item E6.
Thank you, Dr. Diaz, governing board members, cabinet community members that are listening in. This is a receive and discuss item, so feel free to ask questions along the way. I am presenting to you our professional learning plan for 2020-2021, and also reviewing summer professional learning sessions. So we believe that high quality professional learning plus increased instructional effectiveness equals improved student achievement and growth, which is what we are after. That is our goal. Oops. There are two strategic goals that our professional learning plan aligns to. Specifically, we will hire, retain, and develop highly motivated and effective staff. And we will engage every student in a rigorous, relevant, research-based learning environment led by well-trained staff. Our professional learning plan also aligns to our curriculum audit recommendation number 2, develop a comprehensive system to support the effective delivery of curriculum in Phoenix number 1, clearly define expectations for instructional planning, classroom-based approaches, monitoring and professional development to provide a clear picture of engaging, challenging, and effective instruction. We had 2 goals for our summer professional learning opportunities, and those 2 goals were to empower teachers to effectively instruct in a distance learning environment and to maximize teachers' effectiveness with new instructional resources, with an emphasis on the digital components of our new instructional resources. Here's a listing of all the summer professional learning that was offered to our teachers. Any professional learning sessions that occurred prior to July 30th, which was the first date of returning teachers' contract, teachers were paid $25 per hour to attend. If there was any registration fee, we also paid that at the district level. So these are just the dates and the topics and the number of teachers and admin that attended these different professional learning opportunities that were offered during the summer. I'm going to spend a little time talking about distance learning PD session 1, which was on July 31st, the morning of, and then distance learning PD session 2, which was offered on the morning of August 4th. If I can share. So this was an email sent by our coordinator of technology integration to all of our teachers and all of our principals and IISs regarding distance learning part 1, which was offered on July 31st. So you can see that the offerings included distance learning expectations, Google Classroom 101, Zoom live lessons, Google Meets live lessons, building relationships online, asynchronous recorded lessons, tips for asynchronous videos, asynchronous lesson examples, digital citizenship, complete units 1 and 2. We have a whole digital citizenship program.
Denise,
yes.
we're not able to see your email.
Okay. Well, you can just hear what I'm saying then. And I'll get back to my PowerPoint. Digital lesson planning and collaboration. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Weeks. And then I'll just read off on part 2 on August 4th. We had sessions on attendance process, Google Classroom 102, how to organize your Google Classroom, using asynchronous communication tools to enhance student voice, Nearpod and Peer Deck, creating engaging live lessons, providing meaningful feedback in an online classroom, providing accommodations and scaffolds online, digital citizenship part 2, and then cool new tools, which included ID, Hello ID. Teachers had the choice of, they chose 4 sessions out of those that were offered, those that I just listed, and they were to take their own brain stretch breaks accordingly. And at the end of each session, they filled in a feedback form. So just wanted to share with you some of their feedback. This teacher said, I'll give you my one that I'm committing to, TAG. And TAG is an acronym for teachers and students to remember when a teacher requests a student to post in their Google Classroom stream. TAG stands for T, tell something that you learned or liked. A stands for ask a question, and G stands for give a compliment. So this really is focused on digital citizenship, just providing our students with some guardrails when they are posting in a Google Classroom. This one is all about feedback and benchmark accommodations, and a great way, lots of comments about Nearpod and Peer Deck being used in different manners. This one is about cyber safety, digital citizenship.
Denise, I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
I know that you're using Google Classroom as your main platform, and you mentioned Nearpod and Pear Deck there. Do teachers have access to the paid versions of Nearpod and Pear Deck through the district?
I don't know the answer to that. I would have to ask Ms. Ashmore. I can get back to you on that, Ms. Almy. Yep. Okay. Teachers were given work time in the afternoon. So this teacher talked about how she created her attendance form and how Flipgrid and Nearpod increase student achievement or student engagement rather. This teacher commented about being able to meet specific needs and all the cool ways to use Google Slides. And this one talked about all of the tools that teachers are now aware of. This was from a teacher, Moat for Feedback, Flipgrid, Padlet, Hello ID, and just a few more. Teachers learned about Google Keep. Some teachers are using Zoom. We're finding that Zoom works for certain in learning environments, learning settings. And then how to keep live or recorded videos simple and engaging. And I was just sent a text, Ms. Almy, that said, no, we are not paying for those versions. Okay, hold on. Lost my mouse. Patience. Here it is. Okay. So our professional learning objectives is obviously to increase teacher effectiveness and the result being improved student learning. And we're really focused on building our collective efficacy and teacher clarity. Those are two measures that John Hattie says affect student achievement data, positively impact student achievement data. We remain focused on culturally responsive data-driven instruction, and we remain focused on ensuring our curriculum is aligned, our written, taught, and tested curriculum is aligned. We have 3 delivery structures in our school district: site-based professional learning that is organized by our principals, our leadership team; district collaborative team meetings, which is led by our teacher leaders, our district CTM facilitators; and CNI team professional learning. Site-based professional learning is aligned to district strategic plan goals, our curriculum audit recommendations, our professional learning objectives and sub-objectives, and include elements unique to each site. Our district CTMs, we know that learning is social, and our district CTMs provide teachers with the opportunity to gather, collaborate, and learn from teachers that teach the same grade level or subject. Again, the focus is on improving our instructional effectiveness and therefore student achievement and growth. Our focus is to move all of our district CTM members, all of our teachers, towards data-driven conversations around common formative assessments, resulting in selecting the most effective culturally responsive instructional strategies. This was a meet and confer agreement that we agreed upon, that we will be focused as a district on data-driven conversations focused around our common formative assessments. The purpose of our CNI team professional learning sessions is to ensure that our teachers are receiving content that's going to meet their learning needs, as well as align to our new written curriculum and our new instructional resources. Our first CNI team professional learning is August 24th, and teachers will have, like they did on the distance learning professional learning days, they will have a menu of choices that they will choose from to attend, so that their specific professional learning needs are met.
Dr. McLaughlin, I have a follow-up question to that. So for every and I'm looking at the calendar here. For the CNI team professional learning date, that will be specifically focused on the curriculum and the resources that teachers are now using this year, and they will have a menu of options from which to choose.
That is correct. Yep. Now, the options might be limited. If I'm a social studies teacher and all I teach is social studies, I'm going to go to the social studies professional learning, if that makes sense. Self-contained teachers who teach all the subjects will most likely choose the subject that they feel they need the most support in.
And who leads those professional developments as well as the district collaborative team meetings?
The district collaborative team meetings are led by our teachers that teach that specific grade level. So we have a kindergarten teacher leading the kindergarten district collaborative team meeting. We have a special ed teacher leading the special ed collaborative team meeting. A 7th and 8th grade ELA teacher leads the 7th and 8th grade collaborative team meeting. Those are all receive a stipend for being a district CTM facilitator. They will meet with Mr. Alshire, our coordinator of student success, prior to each collaborative team meeting. So we're all on the same page as what common formative assessments are we going to look at, what protocols are we going to use. We're really going to focus on becoming a true PLC at our collaborative team meetings. Oh, and then the CNI team professional learning sessions are facilitated by what we call our CNI core team. So that's our curriculum alignment specialists, our coordinators, Dr. Brown, Nadine Gafania and Nicole Dillon lead the reading interventionists at that time.
Okay, thank you. And then a follow-up question to that, do we have specific, like a consistent expectation or one of these types of professional developments dedicated to looking at like the specific teachers' data? So I assume that their resources provide them assessment data, and as a teacher, you have 1,000 things that you're working on. I know for me was always helpful to have just that dedicated time where I, as a teacher, could look at my data, discuss it with my team. Is that just kind of fluid depending on the site, or is that something that's consistent? What does that look like?
That's the exact purpose of the district CTMs. What you just described is all teachers that teach 3rd grade getting together to look at a common formative assessment that they all administered and just learning from one another. Perhaps you did better, Dr. Diaz, with a particular standard than I did, and so I'd want to learn from you. That's the exact purpose of those district CTMs. On our sites, they also have collaborative team meetings, and that same thing goes on at our sites in those collaborative team meetings.
Okay, and there is an expectation I'm seeing, and you mentioned that they are all data driven.
Correct. Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So monitoring and feedback will extend the learning that takes place in those 3 settings. And that monitoring and feedback, of course, comes from our principals and from our IISs who observe and evaluate our teachers. We will continue to focus on culturally responsive instruction, supporting our principals to coach for equity. And so we started this work last year with Miss Angie Julian, our West Ed consultant. And last year she presented professional learning sessions to our principals at a leadership team meeting in this area of culturally responsive instruction. And then we broke our principals into 4 different cohorts, and we walked through almost 50 classrooms last year. Throughout the year, we all got in the little bus. We have a white bus that's a 14-passenger bus, and we all got in that bus, and we traveled to schools and walked through classrooms and supported one another in identifying this is what culturally responsive teaching looks like and sounds like. So this year, Ms. Julian is going to provide on-site coaching for our leaders, for our individual principals, to ensure that that we develop a shared understanding and vision of this culturally responsive teaching. So the objectives are going to be to have our instructional leaders support teachers in implementing quality, culturally responsive instructional practice that offers students equity in learning and engages students as partners in their own learning and aligns with our standards, and establish agreement or consensus among observers district-wide around what equity looks like and sounds like in the classroom. So we're very excited to continue this work with Ms. Julian and really continue to focus on equity and culturally responsive instruction, and which includes student voice.
Dr. McLaughlin, I have a follow-up question to that slide specifically.
Yeah.
Do we currently have a definition of culturally responsive teaching that are, or instructional practices that our teachers like really know and understand? Or is that like, are we building up to that throughout the district? What is the universal knowledge of that?
We're building up to that. Last year, our district CTM facilitators and our IISs went through a 3-day institute on culturally responsive instruction with Ms. Julian. So they were able to embed some of that learning in their DCTMs that they led, the IISs in their school-based professional learning that they led. Are we there yet? No, but we're continuing to work on that. Yeah.
Do we have, I know that this is kind of, to me, the term in and of itself is very big and it can be very broad. So I'm wondering, do we have specific metrics that will tell us if our instruction is culturally responsive? And is that part of a teacher's evaluation or observation? What does that look like?
Culturally responsive instruction is definitely embedded in the LOI, especially in the elements of student engagement. When we get up to that 5 level, where students are owning their own learning and students are building off of one another's conversations, they're piggybacking off of one another's answers, responses. So there are definite connections to the LOI, culturally responsive instruction, and the LOI. Culturally responsive instruction really is about ensuring that students own their learning, is about students having voice in their learning, is about meeting the needs of the individuals in your classroom, knowing each student's learning style, whether that needs to be an emphasis on visual learning for some students or collaboratively working, hands-on, lab type work. We learned last year some specific strategies that increase that student discourse. So this idea of last year walking through classrooms, and then this year, Ms. Julian walking through classrooms with individual principals will get us to that definition, that agreement, that last bullet, establish agreement and consensus among what does equity look like and sound like in the classroom. So what does it sound like when kids own their own learning, when kids are driving their own learning?
So I guess maybe I'm just not on the same page then with the definition. From my understanding, culturally responsive instructional practices, it does focus on all of those things, but one of the primary purposes is to ensure that your teachers are displaying cultural competencies for the student's background. I mean, is that emphasized? Can you speak to that a little bit more?
It's definitely a piece. It's definitely a piece. It's not the biggest piece of what we have learned from our West Ed consultant. Our West Ed consultant has really focused us on ensuring student voice and ensuring that all students are participating, all students are engaged in the learning. And how do we do that? By ensuring that we know this is how Dr. Diaz engages in learning, this is how Mr. Lind engages in learning. That's what our focus has been.
I guess then I would argue that then they might not be engaging in culturally responsive instructional practices the way that literature defines them, if that is our primary definition.
Okay.
So I wonder if we need to have a conversation with WestEd to understand if there's a different term that we should be using, or if we should modify practices to incorporate that element in a greater way.
Yeah, I can certainly talk to Ms. Julian. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. That concludes my presentation.
This is Susan Benjamin. I just have one question related to just the general professional development. Back, I don't know if it was the last meeting or it was maybe a few meetings ago, I asked how the ED and EDP teachers were going to implement those IEPs with Boys Town Educational Model. And you told me, this is for Dr. You told me that they were going to be trained in common sense parenting. And I said, that's great. I was a trainer. It's a wonderful program. It's aligned with the Boys Town model. And I'm wondering if they have been trained, and if not, when they are going to be trained.
I don't have that information off the top of my head, Ms. Benjamin, but I will get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions or comments? Thank you so much for your presentation. Hearing none, we'll move on to item E7.
And it's still me. Let me get up my next PowerPoint. So I wanted to take an opportunity to just share with the board our K-3 summer school success. This is obviously our summer schools aligned to ensuring that every student we serve is achieving academic success. We had a total of 127 students participate in our K-3 Mauer summer school. We had 29 kindergartners, 28 first graders, 29 second graders, and 41 third graders participate. We used an instructional resource called Time Warp Plus, and each grade level had its own theme that engaged the students in reading. Kindergarten focused on animal tracks, first grade focused on hometowns, second grade focused on ancient Egypt, and third grade focused on ancient Rome. Our summer school coordinator did a family survey over the phone. She conversed with 50 families, and the family members noticed growth. Obviously, this is qualitative data. Noticed growth in their child's ability to decode words, to read new words, to write and complete sentences, and to use newly learned reading strategies. Family members reported that the children wanted to read more now than during the school year. So they were feeling success with reading, so that led to them reading more. And family members were pleased to see that learning was happening when children were on the computer. We also used a teacher checklist to evaluate students' growth in these areas: phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, and writing. And the results of that checklist were for kindergarten, 80% of the students made progress on all of the skills. 23 students made growth in phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, and writing. 6 students improved in phonemic awareness, phonics, and writing, but still struggled with comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency. First grade, we had 90% of students making progress. 25 students made progress in phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, fluency, and writing. All the students were still struggling with vocabulary, which is what we have seen in our Ames Web Plus data district-wide. 4 students improved in phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and writing, but still struggled with comprehension and vocabulary. Second grade, 90% of the students made progress. 26 students made growth in phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. All the students still struggled with comprehension, vocabulary, and writing. It's hard to undo when we've gotten ourselves in bad reading habits. So you see that the skills are not being mastered as well as we move up the grade levels. 3 other students improved in phonemic awareness and phonics, but still struggled with comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, and writing. And then in third grade, 90% of the students made progress. 37 students made growth in phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, vocabulary, and writing. All the students still struggled with fluency, and 4 students improved in phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, and writing, but still struggled with comprehension and fluency. So we definitely saw success in our K-3 Mauer Summer School. Just a shout out to our summer school coordinator, Nicole Dillon. And we had 2 other summer school coordinators and all of our teachers and instructional assistants. They really worked hard to make sure that this distance learning summer school worked, including going to homes and helping with the technology when needed, being available via phone at any moment. So it was a good research based at action research for us to see what was needed in order to engage families. We did find that those families, those students who had an older sibling or a grandma or a grandpa or a parent or an aunt or an uncle by their side definitely achieved at higher rates. So that concludes this K-3 Mauer Summer School presentation.
Thank you. This is just receive and discuss. Are there any questions or comments?
This is Susan Benjamin. Dr. McLaughlin, I forgot how you identified these children.
We identified the bottom 25% in each grade level. We invited close to 200 students, and we had 127 participate. These were our most at-risk students.
Yeah, thank you.
I am really impressed with the outcomes, and thank you to all of our staff who supported our students in summer school. I do have one question regarding the kindergarten students. So I think that first grade, second, and third grade all have 90% of students making progress on the skills. Kindergarten, we're 10% below that. Is there a specific reason that our instructors found out?
It's a very good question. I would be hypothesizing if I responded, but I can certainly find out what our summer school coordinators and summer school teachers thought was the cause of that.
Yeah, I mean, my suspicion is just, I know that there are gaps coming into kindergarten. And so I think it is a larger question around how our district can and is and has been ensuring all of our students can access pre-K. I know it's a little different because we're in COVID right now, but it's a fundamental, I think, need for all of our students. So I think having that larger conversation is something I'm interested in, and I'll formulate what that looks like here at the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Are there any additional comments or questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item F1.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The first item is regarding liability insurance coverage, a very interesting topic I'm sure you will enjoy. But it's really regarding liability coverage for COVID cases and so forth. One of the big questions out there that's been hanging out there is regarding coverage for these type of cases, and also what happens when maybe a student or a visitor contracts the virus at a school, who covers that expense, who covers the liability. And up to this point, there wasn't any kind of coverage or insurance available for that. And so the trust, which is our broker insurance coverage for property and casualty and general liability insurance, they provided a coverage, if you will, for this particular coverage. And so what we're looking for is we want to be able to purchase this policy and put it in place, obviously, and we want to get the approval of the board, to make that happen. Again, the trust established this insurance policy. It's a brand new program for them that they put together, and the coverage covers the district in case students or visitors contract the virus at our school or any of our sites. And in case where a family files a claim against the district or to staff or board members, this coverage will protect us from that liability. It does have some deductibles to it. The overall premium is $75,000 for the year, but it also has some deductibles that range from $0 to $20,000 per case, depending on if we have a waiver signed by the family, whether we have an acknowledgement letter signed by the family, or none at all. So the highest level deductible will be $20,000 per case, and again $0 if we have this waiver signed. And it also, if we like, this can also retro back to July 1st for coverage. And we sent you information on the limits on here. It does have a $1 million limit for each occurrence. It also has an overall $2 million limit for the district, and $25 million for all districts as a whole. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
And thank you, Mr. Quintana. Can I have a motion to approve item F1?
This is Susan Benjamin. So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. And are there any discussions or comments?
I have a question about the waiver, not necessarily the liability coverage. Are we going to be asking families to sign these waivers for those who are returning on Monday?
We are. We're trying to put all the forms in place so that we can ask them to sign effective for tomorrow, effective for Monday. And we're also acknowledging the fact that if families do not want to sign, we have some other options that we're offering for them to sign a waiver. If they don't feel comfortable with that, we're asking them to sign an acknowledgement instead of a waiver. But also, if they decide that they don't want to sign anything, they can still attend the school. We just have to take the responsibility and liability of the higher deductible. But to answer your question, yes, we're going to be asking them to sign waivers effective for Monday.
Thank you. And you answered my other questions with that. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. That the item passes, and we are moving on to item F3.
Thank you, Madam President. This next item is regarding a mentoring program for new teachers that I'm going to turn this over to Dr. McLaughlin to address.
Thank you, Mr. Quintana. Yes, we are requesting that the board approve a new teacher mentor job description for a stipend. This will be funded out of our Title II funds specifically. We have relied on KESA peer evaluators as well as our field specialist over the last couple years to provide professional learning to our new teachers, to provide mentoring to our new teachers. As you know, our grant ends next school year, so we will no longer have access to our peer evaluators and our field specialists to serve as mentors for our new teachers. So we want to take this year for our new teacher mentors that will be on our sites to work with the peer evaluators and our field specialists from Nikisa to learn the sequence of the curriculum, if you will, for supporting a new teacher. These new teacher mentors at each site, these site-based new teacher mentors will be facilitated, their work will be facilitated by Nadine Cavagna, our coordinator of federal programs. She will be overseeing the new teacher mentors and supporting them to support their mentees. So administration recommends that the governing board approve this new teacher mentor job description for a stipend.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Do I have a second?
This is Lene Almy, I'll second.
Are there any questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. That the motion passes, and now we will move on to item F3.
Thank you, Madam President. This next item is regarding a partnership and agreement that we have with ASU Prep. And as you know, we have a longstanding partnership with them, and also an in-kind agreement that Dr. Anna Battle is going to give us an update and a presentation on that agreement and what we're doing with it. So Dr. Anna Battle, please join us.
Good evening, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Larry Weeks, and your amazing staff. I enjoyed my evening listening to all of you cover from mountain about the things that schools are being asked to do to ensure that we are there for our kids. I think you either have or will have a display of the in-kind. Thank you. Okay, can't see that? We can get a little larger. If not, I'll be glad to go. Okay. Well, let me just give you a little bit of a history. I know it's late, but I have to commend the staff that you work with. It's really been phenomenal developing a professional relationship with your leadership and being able to work with them to determine what's best for your district. So a lot of thought and effort happened. I met with Dr. McLaughlin and also Dr. Hidalgo. I've had a meeting with Mr. Quintana already. It's been fabulous. Also, Dr. Diaz has been very instrumental here this summer, so we can ensure that we serviced you with the very best effort. So you can see that we started out, and this is not new to you as we initiated. There are some things that changed. And then, of course, there was something called COVID that interfered with our progress this past March. Nevertheless, we continue to work very diligently to make sure we provided valuable in-kind services to Phoenix Elementary School District. So with that said, you will see that we had ongoing meetings. Dr. Silver from ASU provided some support for dual language. It was more or less resource, I would say, and also consultation. Additionally, there was initiated the work study program through ASU. There was training to support the question, Dr. Diaz, Madam President, relative to implicit biases and aggressive, microaggressive training to staff to do train the trainer model. And then there was some discussion to talk about signature schools. Dr. Larry Weeks has aspirations to see anything and everything he can do for the schools that you have, the amazing schools that you have. And then there was a survey that was requested to get some feedback on the PECTA survey. We had some really good dialogue and very innovative thought with Dan Dixon and Jason Manning, and Dr. Diaz was helpful with that to help some recruiting measures. And then as well, we had digital classes. That's very innovative, and we had no idea that we would end our school year the way we did. At the same time, you all last January were able to fulfill some vacancies using the ASU Prep digital platform in their courses. And then, as I mentioned, there are some video marketing services that will be deployed and or have been initiated here the latter part of the summer. The goal was to get to 75,000. That was a part of the agreement. We were able to meet that with 75,806 and 88 cents. So we all were very, very, we were happy with the end. We had hoped that we could have done more. That was going to be the minimal. Of course, we had really phenomenal strategies in place to partner and develop some professional learning opportunities. And so we are very hopeful that that will be something that we can continue to talk with here in the near future. And it'd be my pleasure to answer any questions that you might have.
Dr. Battle, this is Susan Benjamin.
Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to thank you for providing this, so we see specifically, you know, what the service was, and then the cost of those in-kind services for us. It's very helpful, and I appreciate your due diligence in providing that to us, and for your work with our team. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
I would echo that, Dr. Battle. It's really been a pleasure to work with you and your team this year. Just the collaboration and the commitment. It was very nice indeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weeks. And I have the same to say to you as well as your staff. It's really been a very positive experience. Thank you so much.
I have a few follow-up questions. Thank you, Dr. Battle, for your presentation and for all the work that you've done on behalf of the partnership. And these questions might be directed towards our admin. I'm not sure, but for item 6, do we have more information on what the outcomes were for the school?
Dr. Silva helped the dual language team at Herrera form a new vision and determine a model for them to use for dual language. Mr. Ardone was hired to strengthen that dual language program, and Dr. Silva helped support that.
Well, I think it would be helpful to get a presentation at some point with just what that looks like from our school's perspective now that we've received this model. And then I have a follow-up question on number 12. Did we track outcomes for that? And have we compared that to, so I'm sorry, let me back up. Was this specifically the math class, or which, was it?
Yes.
Okay.
This was the 6th and 8th grade math class at Capital.
Okay, and was specifically for vacancies, right? It's not.
Correct. Correct. It was specifically for vacancies. Yes.
Do we have outcomes that we can look at and compare to just like other efforts we've done?
Yes, we can get that to the board. Yep.
Thank you. Then I have a question. So item 11 and item 13, are those related?
It would be my pleasure to initiate that discussion. I think Dr. Diaz, Victor Diaz would be able to add more, but they are related. So there were meetings that occurred prior to help to plan, and then later, the latter part of the summer, it was decided that we would support the video marketing venture to ensure that we would help you to increase and sustain your teachers year over year. So we really look forward to that outcome. Dr. Diaz?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Battle. Yeah, that's still in process for us right now. We met over the summer to set a vision for a variety of different video projects that would come out of ASU through the Human Resources Office to inspire, engage our staff. They would be used internally and externally as far as a retention tool as well as a recruitment tool. So those are still in development. We're very hopeful that we'll have them in our hands over the next couple of, it's always hard for me to make any kind of projection on a timeline given everything with COVID, but it's my hope we'd have these in the coming weeks.
Thank you. I'm really excited to see that. We have great retention, but it's always great to showcase what our teachers are doing. And when we do need to recruit, I think those are going to be a great asset. In addition to teacher videos for the purpose of teacher retention and recruitment, are we doing any types of videos for, I guess, enrollment purposes? I guess I'm wondering, would there be any videos that our community could see or potential family might see, and that would perhaps provide an incentive for them to enroll their kids in our school?
Well, I think as we know, this particular in-kind is closing out the FY20. And so to this end, we would not be able to add it here, Dr. Diaz, Madam President. But as far as future discussions go, we will definitely keep it in mind.
Thank you. And to the discussion regarding future plans, I know that there's going to be an executive session here. Will we continue to does this, I guess, roll over every year that we're in partnership? And the reason I ask is we have work in items 8 and 9 that we need to continue to really dive into. So I'm just wondering if we'll be able to leverage ASU's in-kind services for that moving forward, or if this was kind of the end of that partnership.
You know what, I think that Dr. Weeks will tell you, as well as Dr. McLaughlin and Dr. Diaz and Mr. Quintana, we have agreed to continue to work together. We're a team. I think they found me an office at PEST. But nevertheless, we will definitely stay in contact to make sure, because we all know we want the very best for your school community. And we mean that sincerely from ASU Prep to you. So whatever we can do to help support in reason in your further discussion, it'd be our pleasure to do our very, very best to do so.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Is there any further discussion?
No, ma'am.
Okay, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn to executive session.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. And I believe Dr. Farmer was with you earlier.
Yes, Dr. Farmer's with us.
Still here. Did you want to introduce her to the?
It'd be my pleasure. Yes, Dr. Toni Farmer is here. She's Deputy VP. I'll let her introduce herself. She's been very instrumental to the part of the discussion that you're going into exec session to discuss. Please, Dr. Farmer.
Yes, good evening. First, let me say congratulations on a phenomenal start. It just so happens I did about 12 years in the asynchronous and synchronous space. So the work that you've done is beyond phenomenal. So congratulations. And to the board, Dr. Diaz, we're so excited to see you leading in the way that you are. And Superintendent Weeks, it has been a pleasure really to work with you on the lease and on the in-kind services, and just to partner overall. So I'm really happy to be part of this. My role is one of, for the purposes of this, finance and budgeting. So have a great conversation with the team about how we can partner and really have a win-win situation with the lease. And I believe we've done that.
Thank you, Dr. Farmer. And I believe this is your first Zoom board meeting. So welcome to Zoom. And thank you, Dr. Battle.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Diaz, you were about to move us into executive session.
Yes, I've never moved the board to executive session, so I don't know if I need to say a time.
Dr. Diaz, we just need a motion to go into executive session, and then whoever is taking the minutes can note the time that we would be going. And I do believe that we need to exit and go into a new link. So we'll all need to exit on our Zoom channels. Dr. Battle and Dr. Farmer, this is Jennifer McClennan. Welcome this evening. I do believe that the governing board is going to meet in executive session with my partner, Laura Severblanco, as well, who you've been in communication with. And if by any chance we need you, I know she's got your phone numbers, and we will contact you and ask you to join, but I don't expect that we will this evening.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And we'll make sure that Laura Severblanco gets in touch after. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So Dr. Diaz, we would need a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to the statutory references listed in the agenda for the purpose of discussing the lease with ASU Prep.
Thank you. And before I call for that motion, I will need somebody to text or call me since I am not going to be attending the executive session. I need to know when to jump back on this week.
I'll call you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn to executive session?
This is Carmen Trujillo, so moved.
Do I have a second?
I second. Louisa.
Okay. We are adjourned, or sorry, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. With that, we'll go ahead and move to executive session.
Okay, let's get out of here. Leave.
It's just
Meeting.
I didn't take us out of there.
What?
I didn't.
I've got this thing.
Oh, you already had it. Oh, okay.
That's what that has. Oh.
Okay, Troy, we're coming back. Madam Chair, I received word that Susan Benjamin will not be coming back to general session. No, you're on mute.
Okay, I was just, are the four of us still, are the other three here? Let's see.
Yes. I don't see Ms. Trujillo, but I see that she's back in. I see Mrs. Almy.
So if Ms. Benjamin will be joining us.
No, she will not.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Stark.
Dr. Stark is here.
Okay.
Dr. Stark has not reconnected yet, but I just texted Jim to let her know that, or to have him help her get back on.
Oh, okay, thanks, Troy. I thought I saw her, but I did not.
So we will resume to regular session. Do I need a motion to do that?
No, you just resume in regular session. You might want to call out the time.
It is 9:33 p.m. and we will resume to regular session.
Okay.
And here.
Yeah.
Right, we'll go ahead and move on to item H1.
Yes, good evening again. Thank you, Troy, for bringing up the policy that we're introducing as first reading. I'd like to introduce this policy by stating first that I'll be working closely with Mr. Quintana and his team, as well as any other staff members or community members that are interested in reviewing this policy revision related to bidding, purchasing procedures. This policy is in the queue from ASBA as part of the policy service advisory that requires an update due to some recent changes with the Auditor General's office, as well as the Arizona Department of Education. Before I look at the one specific item, I just would like to highlight a couple of abbreviations in the document. In the first paragraph, it speaks about the AAC R7-2-114 et sequitur. AAC is the abbreviation for Arizona Administrative Code, and that is the document which it contains all of the laws of the state of Arizona. And this policy is referenced with the R7-2-1141, which does speak specifically about procurement, and the et sequitur means and those that follow in the sequence of 1141 to 1142 and so forth through that entire segment. And then further down that section, we have ARS. Those are the Arizona Revised Statutes. You'll notice this first reference is for number 23. That is Arizona Revised Statute 23, item number 214. And 23 happens to be all about labor. And then the next ARS, Arizona Revised Statute 41, is related to state government, and specifically it relates to the E-Verify process. Into the second paragraph, you will notice the parentheses 2 CFR-200-321. CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations. And these are federal laws that apply to the state of Arizona. And specifically, this is referenced in the words right prior to that, encouraging the district to be in compliance with contracting with small and minority business, women business enterprises, and labor surplus area firms. I just wanted to highlight those abbreviations because as we review policy, it's important that we read those documents to ensure that we understand the federal and state guidelines that are relevant to our policies. And Troy, if you just want to scroll up a little bit so that the red section is at the top of the screen. The change here is in this particular paragraph. The Auditor General and the Department of Education are changing the guidelines from verbal to written quotations for purchases in the range of $10,000 to $100,000. And that is an increase on the upper end from $50,000 to $100,000. This is the change that is required by Arizona. And so what we'll do is we'll review this with the team and ensure that this is where we want to land with our policy. And Troy, if you scroll down even further, keep going to practically the very end. You'll notice as we continue through this, there are a lot of legal references to Arizona revised statutes. And if you keep going down a little bit further, there is the Arizona Administrative Code, as well as USuffer. That is the Uniform System of Financial Services. Did I get that last word right, Dr. Weeks? Yes. And so we'll be looking at all of those documents to ensure that we understand that and how that applies back to the policy. I also want to acknowledge to the governing board that there is a regulation that accompanies this policy. And so the team will review the regulation to ensure that it's current and accurate and that it reflects the changes that will occur in this policy. And if you want to scroll back up to the top, Troy, I just wanted to introduce this evening as the first reading and would welcome any comments from the governing board. I will be scheduling time with Mr. Quintana and his team, as well as any others who are interested, and would welcome any comments from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Lind. Are there any comments or questions?
Dr. Diaz, I have a suggestion. There's so many moving parts to this particular policy when it connects to business, that I would recommend that we bring a presentation on what purchasing looks like. The Uniform System of Financial Records is managed by the Auditor General, for example. However, approval of the Arizona Administrative Code is managed by the State Board of Education. The CFR regulations are managed by the federal government. So you have all of these, and then of course, in some of our statutory references, it references city governments. So with all of this that's going on between now and the time we do a second reading, I think what we'll find is there's not a lot of wiggle room that goes along with this policy. This policy is fairly well locked down by statutory language, State Board of Education, Auditor General, et cetera, that we really probably should have a presentation on how does this really look in day-to-day practice? What does the board feel about having a presentation like that?
I think that would be helpful to understand this process.
We can certainly put that together.
Yes, and I agree with having that presentation prior to the second reading. so that when we ask for approval, we have some informed information available to us.
Madam President, I got a question or two. Is it time for questions, or just since it's a first reading, it's not really open for discussion?
Yeah, you can ask questions.
Thank you. First, I wanted to ask, I know I wrote down the question of who is the team, as far as Mr. Lin talking about the work. Sounds like Mr. Quintana and maybe some financial administration roles. And I'm glad to hear about the presentation part. So I'm also wondering if we could maybe turn it into a work study session, just to have a conversation about making sure this policy is equitable, it is competitive, and it's broad enough where it's open, kind of where it supports the community, I guess is what I'm saying. Because the language in it, from my perspective, it somewhat bottlenecks, and I do think it could be more open and more competitive across the board. So as far as having like an open discussion about that, which I think would kind of create a different policy. What does everybody think about that?
I really like that idea. I think, so are you, Ms. Trujillo, are you getting to kind of like the idea around just making sure that there are so many small businesses and businesses that might not be the first ones to know about this, and just making sure that we have processes and systems in place that wouldn't preclude those individuals and in essence routinely just get the same exact contractors that we've always had. I really am in favor of that. I think that we should certainly make sure that all businesses, small and large, have an opportunity to bid.
That's all. Just to kind of understand the process as a whole, and be able to have an open discussion about it.
I think that's a good idea. So we'll put that together before the second reading, so everybody goes into this policy approval with eyes wide open.
Thank you.
And that really concludes all I have to say about the policy. I just did want to introduce it as a first reading, and we'll begin with the work that we've just described that we would do.
Thank you, Mr. Lind. Are there any additional questions or comments?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item I1. Do I have any board reports or requests?
Not at this time.
So I have a report item. I mentioned it earlier in the meeting, but if we could get more information on just the outcomes from our math class that ASU Prep provided. And then I don't know if this is a board request or if it's an agenda item tied into some other things that I have, but I really do want to hear back from our consultant that is teaching or providing professional development around cultural competency I just want to make sure that we are really aligning the PD to what literature says that cultural competency is, or cultural responsive instruction, I suppose. And then, let's see. Sorry, I have my notes kind of everywhere. That is all that I have for requests.
So Dr. Diaz, during Dr. McLaughlin's presentation, I did take a note with regards to WestEd's culturally responsive training that they've provided, and the definition as one of the outcomes, because as you recall, we had a definition for equity and, you know, all of that. So it would stand to reason that we would have a definition that we can all lean onto for this. I'm going to recommend that we bring WestEd in on a presentation specific to culturally responsive teaching.
I think that would be helpful. I think if, for me, what I'm looking for, given my understanding of it, is, you know, books, curriculums, resources that dive into or highlight, celebrate the culture of the students in the classrooms and have those types of conversation. And I think that that really aligns very nicely with the work of our equity team and the action items in the timeline. I know that that is somewhat related to one of our action items. So I think a presentation would be great. And if somehow it is embedded with that timeline to show alignment, that would also be helpful. If it's not, like, I understand that as well.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do in terms of timeline, but I certainly want to get, I certainly think it's appropriate to bring WestEd in to have that conversation so that we're all on the same page.
Okay, thank you. And then if we could also get an update on, maybe you answered the question already, just the synchronous, whether or not there can be some maximum guidance on synchronous teaching, and if there's flexibility to switch between, like, what does that actually look like in terms of age groups?
Yeah, we'll take a deep dive into that, let you guys know.
Okay, thank you. So those are all my requests. And then in terms of actually, I'll save that for later. Okay, are there any additional ones? All right, we'll move on to item I2, any future agenda items? I have a few, and these do not by any means have to happen next board meeting because they're a few, and I know that some of them will take a lot longer, so I will defer to admin on the timing of that. But I would like a presentation from our new marketing director once she has her feet underway on just what the strategies are going to look like, community engagement, those types of things. I think that would be really helpful for us to just get like a broad overview of what this is going to look like moving forward. And then I would like to have more streamlined or regular updates from the equity action team. I know that there's a lot of work that they're doing, and so I don't know if that's quarterly. I would defer to the equity action team on that, but I think it would be important for us to have more consistent updates from them. And then I do know that there is a work group that is looking into TIF funding and how we're going to reconcile what's going to happen after we no longer have those funds. So at some point, a presentation around that would be helpful. And then there are two more. So one, just following up on the task force that addresses the topic of what our replacement plan is for SROs, whether it's a task force or a different type of plan, making sure that we get an agenda item for that. And then finally, I think this is more of a study session at a time that's appropriate for you all, but looking at pre-K, figuring out approximately how many of our families are not utilizing our services, what's our capacity to bring in additional families. And I know that we fund pre-K ourselves, so I know this is not going to be a popular topic of discussion, but discussing the possibility of offsetting the cost of our families who would send their children to pre-K in our district families with tuition from out-of-district families that attend Shaw Montessori. So I think that's a larger discussion, study session type deal. But I'm happy to think through what that would look like as well. And those are all for me.
Dr. Diaz, are you talking about a fee-paid structure for preschool?
If in fact we determined that we did not have the capacity to enroll all of the families that would like our services or that would need our services, I think that we should explore the option of a fee-based structure specifically for out-of-district families who who are enrolling their children in Shaw Montessori preschool.
Okay. There's models out there we can look at.
And this goes back to the conversation that we briefly had with the 10% decrease in kindergarten proficiency for summer school. There's a lot of research out there that discusses the gaps of lower socioeconomic communities and kindergarten readiness. So I think it should be a priority of ours to ensure as many of our pre-K students or potential students are enrolled in one of our pre-Ks. And how we do that, I'll leave it up to you guys since you're the experts.
Okay.
That is all for me. Are there any additional future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, we will adjourn at 9:54 p.m.
Good night.